Hi, I'm Sandra, PhD in nutrition and French pastry chef. And today I am so excited to share this conversation with Kathryn Kay. She's the founder of MycoEarth and a true pioneer in showing how fungi can nourish our bodies and heal our soil. This is part one of our deep dive into the intelligence, nourishment, and healing power of mushrooms. Today, I am honored to introduce someone who brings both deep wisdom and practical experience to the world of fungi. Kathryn Kay is the founder of MycoEarth, a groundbreaking company that bridges gourmet mushrooms cultivation with regenerative agriculture. With a background in nutrition, horticulture, and sustainable farming, Kathryn makes complex biological systems easy to understand and even easier to apply in our daily lives. What she's about to share about mushrooms, their cycles, their nutritional power, and how to cook them will shift the way you see food, health, and the soil beneath your feet. I am so happy for you to learn from her. Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm excited to be here with you. Very excited. Thank you for allowing me to share with your audience today about the fungal pharmacy. This is a fun presentation. We're going to talk about how to cook mushrooms, what happens in our body when we eat them, and how to use them in medicine as well. At first, we're going to define the kingdom of fungi, because within that entire kingdom is the lowly mushroom that we're going to be talking about today. Otherwise, the kingdom of fungi is one of the living kingdoms on the planet. They produce spores instead of seeds. And it also includes molds like you see on this strawberry. And it includes yeast like you see in the bread. But it also, again, is a mold when the bread goes bad, right? When it begins to decompose. And then the last picture is of a wonderful meal that I had years ago with mushrooms. So in general, the kingdom of fungi is any group of spore-producing organisms. So they don't have seeds, they have spores instead. And here at MycoEarth, we work with the spores with a microscope because primarily they are microscopic. Mushrooms and fungi feed on organic matter. So when they're in the forest, for example, they will help break down trees and leaves and any other once living organic matter to be able to put the nutrients back into the soil. So I think that's a very important thing that fungi does.
Yes, I have a question for you, Kathryn.
Yes.
So the mold you see on the bread, is that the mold from the air?
Yes, it's coming from the air. It's coming from the air. And what's interesting about that particular mold is that it's called penicillium, which is the same molecule that then was taken into a laboratory to make the antibiotic penicillin. Many of the pharmaceuticals that we have in this country they're based on fungi and the molecule thereof. And it's interesting that even when fungi is what you and I would call being bad, and it's kind of a rogue fungi, one that we wouldn't eat and we wouldn't cook with and so forth, we have found that it actually works to be able to work against cancer, for example. It will attack that cell. So even sometimes when we have a rogue fungi, it can be medicinally beneficial. But in this case, this is an airborne fungi in everybody's kitchen, it's just in the air. It's called penicillium, and its purpose is to decompose. So here it's decomposing, but again, the penicillium was used to make penicillin, which helps decompose a bacterial infection as an antibiotic. So I think that's very, it's interesting, isn't it? How it's all tied together.
Very much interesting.
Very tied together. Okay, my friend, here we go. So there's lots of different colors and shapes and so forth of mushrooms. Not all mushrooms are edible. And as I say sometimes in the presentations I give, some are so poisonous that you eat only once, if you get my point there. There are some mushrooms, like the lion's mane mushroom that is on the top row clear to the right. That is a delicious mushroom that is also considered a medicinal mushroom. It is very good for the nerve systems within the body. It works against neuropathy, and it also has been proven to arrest early stage Alzheimer's. So it is wonderful to eat. A mushroom, a lion's mane steak burger is amazing. Amazing. So there are some mushrooms that we can't cultivate, like the morel mushroom, which is the lowest. It's on the bottom shelf to the left there. Only a few farms in the world are able to cultivate that at this point. And it is a delicious mushroom as well. It goes for a lot of money per pound. The mushroom that's right next to that is growing out of a grasshopper, is called a cordyceps. And cordyceps is, it's the gold of athletes, is the way that I put it in my mind. Every gold Olympic medalist in the last, I don't know how many Olympics, way back, have had a steady diet and taken medicinally this cordyceps mushroom. It helps open up the bronchi in the lungs. And so it allows more power with the body because there's oxygen in the body. And it also gives an energy boost that has nothing to do with the oxygen. So it's like having coffee with no downside, no drop. And it's all natural. It's a wonderful, wonderful mushroom. The mushroom that's in the upper left-hand corner is a chef favorite. It's a king oyster mushroom. There's a lot of B vitamins in that mushroom, and it helps the body to convert calories into energy, and to convert food in general into energy. Now, a chef will take that mushroom and cut it in the short direction, as you see there, because with enough garlic and enough scallopy flavors with that, you couldn't tell the difference between a seafood scallop and a mushroom scallop. It's a wonderful, wonderful mushroom. Okay, let's talk about how they grow in nature. And then we'll get into the wonderfulness of what happens within the body. So as you can see, we've got the sunflower to the left-hand side and then the mushroom life cycle to the right. The reason why I compare these is because it's very different than a plant. In the case of the sunflower, everything under the soil is just that root structure, right? We just know where the soil line is there. But with a mushroom, if you look at the numbers, 1, and it goes around clockwise, 1 through 6 are all underground. And we only just see the mushroom coming up out of the ground or the tree or on the farm within the substrate that we cook them in. So in mushroom farming, everything's underground. And then we just have the mushroom, which would be equivalent to only the sunflower poking its head up out of the soil. So what would be equal to the stem and the leaves and so forth is all underground for a mushroom.
That's fascinating.
I would love to show you how a mushroom sporulates, because when you go around that life cycle, I'd like to go back to that. So from the life cycle there, the number 1, the spores, which are the seeds, would come right out of that cap, and it would go into the wind or onto the ground or in the water to be carried away. So then the mushroom can branch out and grow in other places as well. So number 2 is actually, it's a spore print, and you don't get a spore print in nature. What I'm trying to simulate that is if I would have cut the cap off of the mushroom and then stuck it on a piece of glass and then maybe a coffee cup or something over the top of it, and then waited 12 or 24 hours, I could take the lid off the coffee cup and then hold it up to the light. This is exactly what I would see. So it looks exactly like the gills up in that cap of the mushroom I just took off, but all of those are spores that have dropped. Now, some spores are not microscopic. You can actually see them with your naked eye, and that's what we're looking at here. So in nature, when a mushroom sporulates, the spores can do a couple things. The spores can find each other and mate. Even though there's no male or female, they do mate, and then they begin to grow that mycelial mat, the root structure kind of thing, because mushrooms don't have roots, but they have the structure that grows underground. That's called mycelium. So the spores will mate, or they'll just germinate. It depends on the kind of mushroom and the weather and all those kinds of things. But then on number 5 there, you can see that they begin to fuse together and to make the mycelial mat underground. And what is so interesting to me is if you walk into the forest and there's a fungi that's in the forest that's connecting the roots of all the trees and so forth, in a shoe, in an adult size shoe, there's about 300 miles of mycelium under one shoe.
Incredible.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I saw that you had like a spore positive and a negative spore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not female or male.
No.
But they need to be positive and negative. And what is that? Do you know?
The positive and negative is not even a charge like in an atom.
Okay.
All it depicts for this purpose is that they want to mate. They want to get together. That's all. But what's interesting is some of them don't need a mate. They just germinate.
And it depends on the kind of mushroom or just the environment?
Both. Some mushrooms, they only need a mate. Some mushrooms, they only germinate. But what's interesting is that there are some mushrooms that really pay attention to the amount of rainfall and the temperature and how much shade that they get from the sun with the trees and the canopy overhead and so forth. So because there are so many mushrooms, it's difficult to tell which ones are going to do that. So I'm real blessed when we know what we're doing in a farm with specific mushrooms, because we know what we need to help them do when we get into a petri dish, or whether we put them directly into maybe oak sawdust or something. So it's science has narrowed it down for us, for those of us that farm mushrooms. They've narrowed it down so that we know how to help. It's too fun. So this slide, I wanted to just show you very quickly this particular mushroom and how it sporulates. So the cap of the mushroom has grown up and the stem has come up out of the soil and the cap has opened up, and now it wants to make the next generation, to spread the spores. So what you're looking for in this is a wisp of what looks like smoke coming out of this mushroom. Can you see in the image the smoke?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So those are billions and billions and billions of spores that are being out into the wind.
Released.
Yes, they're just being released. And what's interesting is that they are being released at about 200 miles an hour. They don't just drop out. They go.
And you think mushrooms are, just very stable? It's incredible training for doing this.
They are so powerful. And you know what's interesting is I have watched a video of a mushroom coming up, breaking asphalt. It came up through an asphalt road.
That's funny. That's funny you say that, because I'm from Paris, and I always noticed bumps in the asphalt. Yes. And it was years later that I heard, it's mushrooms that do that.
It's you wonder how, right? It's like there's such delicate little things, but yet they can force through. And it is because of the water that's in them. They have power. And one of the ways they have that power I find so interesting. Do you know how when something grows, there's a cell division? So you start off with one cell, and then there's 2, and then they divide, and there's 4, and so forth. That's what happens with that entire cycle, clear up until we start to see a baby mushroom. With that little pinhead that's coming up. So what's interesting to me is that is all the growing that's going to do. The only way that it continues to get bigger and so forth is just to absorb water in each cell. So there's no more cell division. They just blow up full of water. And it's during that time that they have such power to break through asphalt. Isn't that interesting?
It's more than interesting. It's
yes.
like, it's the first time, I hear something like this. So
yes. And then
mind-blowing.
When you see a mushroom sporulate, it looks like it's just wisping out. Mm-hmm. It's 200 miles an hour. It just goes. One day I was harvesting mushrooms in my grow, and I put a big bunch, just maybe 5 or 6 pounds. It was a lot, on the kitchen counter. And then I needed to answer the phone. And when I got back, the spores, the whole group had sporulated in my kitchen there. And it was, my counter was about 10 feet long. And the spores just made a mark that looked like baby powder from one end clear down to the 10-foot mark. I was still wiping up spores. That's how powerful they came out. They didn't just drop 10 feet in my kitchen, clear across. Amazing.
In such a short time also. It's absolutely amazing.
Okay. They're only one, as we touched on a moment ago, of the kingdoms of life on Earth. So there's the plant kingdom, there's the fungi kingdom, there's the animal kingdom, which represented by the fish here that we're part of, right? And then the other kingdoms, look at that. Bacteria, 78%. Okay? They're in, and the protists, they're in the air, they're in our bodies, they're in the soil, they're in and on everything, absolutely everything. This is why then, when we go to cultivate mushrooms in the laboratory, it needs to be a laboratory with a very powerful flow hood that has positive pressure and a HEPA filter. And then we show a UV light when we're not in there. There's a big light bulb. There's a UV light that can kill all the germs and the contaminants to our mushroom farm in that area before we ever start. Because when we want to grow something to begin with in our petri dish, for example, we don't want penicillium in there, right? And part of the reason why is because some bacteria, for example, or other kinds of molds, they go from their spore, their whole life cycle, and back around where the adult mature can sporulate again, are in 20 minutes.
Oh my.
So they can take over our lab. They can take over our petri dish. So we have to make sure that things are sterilized in there. So we shower, fresh clothes, cover ourselves from head to toe. We look like surgeons when we go in there. And then that way, those of us that are cultivating mushrooms on a farm know that we just have that particular mushroom growing in there. And then we have several different ways to make sure that it's pure before we ever begin to grow that mushroom out. So it's quite a process. So I wanted to mention here too, that every kingdom has what you and I would call a positive or a negative. For example, if we were talking about the plants, poison ivy is not my favorite, right? So I would say that would be a negative, right? But on the other hand, you eat a plant-based diet solely, and it keeps you alive and it keeps you healthy. Your skin is gorgeous. It's perfection, correct? It's just perfection. So, and then with the animals, let's just touch with fungi. There are negatives there as well. For those people, last summer, unfortunately, in the United States, more than 45 people died eating the wrong mushroom when they were foraging. But here's the kicker, and here's my warning to your audience. Please do not use an AI-generated mushroom identification app on your phone when you're
That's what killed them.
That's what killed them. Oh, there are too many lookalikes that if you don't have the old-time book in front of you, where you're able to see what they should smell like, because sometimes it's just the scent that will tell you. This one smells acidic. This one smells like lavender, for example. They look exactly the same. But if you intake the wrong one, it could be costing you your life.
Yes.
So you need to be very careful with that. Okay.
Thank you for the warning, because
You bet. You bet. And then let's talk about bacteria. The bacteria in the gut, if we're talking about positives and negatives, what could that be? That could be a benefit. What am I trying to think of? It could be probiotic. My goodness, I'm so busy in my own world trying to keep bacteria out of my lab, I couldn't even remember the word probiotic. But in the gut, then the probiotics are beautiful, right? But
yes.
if the bacteria in the gut is a foodborne illness, not good. So there's an up and a down with every one of them, right? I want to just make that clear.
And actually, it's a question of balance.
The microbiome in the gut, yes. Yes. So what you're saying then is that there's bad bacteria in there, but as long as there's the balance with the good, a person can be healthy.
Yes, basically.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much for watching this conversation with Kathryn. If you'd like to get in touch with her and learn more about what she's doing with MycoEarth, all her links and contact info are in the description below. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to subscribe. See you next time. À bientôt.